Okay, listen up, you little guardians. We gotta talk about the new voidlock. This new Warlock class is actually really cool, and there are some unique builds out there and ways to play it. In this video, I'll show you exactly how the voidlock abilities work, which ones I think are the most powerful, then I'll show you 3 of my favorite PvP builds, and finally we'll have a little discussion about voidlock 3.0 within the context of competitive PvP, like survival, trials, or scrims. It actually does have a really unique role you can build into, which I will call midfielder, and you don't want to overlook it because I think it's fun and it can actually be effective. Alright, let's get to it. The new aspect called Child of the Old Gods summons a little void buddy that apparently has 0 drop off. Like, you can shoot someone for a very small amount of damage at what we found to be 80 meters away, if not more, and the void buddy will go find them and start draining their health and applying a 5% weaken effect to them, so any damage you do is just going to be 5% more. Sometimes this gets a little difficult if you're peek shotting at somebody, and when I've been playing PvP, I noticed that sometimes it just doesn't always track to them if you're peek shotting really fast, but it's still pretty reliable. It summons a 10-meter radius of where people are going to get weakened, and it's a really good way to zone things off. It also kind of bounces around Titan barricades and goes to find your enemy, which is really cool. If you choose the healing rift while you have your Child of the Old Gods void buddy active, it'll give you grenade and melee energy back as they're being drained, which is really useful. And if you choose the empowering rift, then while they're being drained, you're going to get chunks of health back every time they're drained, which is really good during the midst of a fight because you can do more damage than them and you'll be getting your health back. The melee ability Pocket Singularity has a range of about 22 meters and it'll do about 60 damage. It also has really nice tracking, so it can go around corners and hit your enemies. You can also do a really cool wombo combo effect with most of the grenades, though I've found the magnetic grenade to be the most effective for this. You throw the melee and then immediately after you throw your grenade ability and it's a one-shot kill. It's not that hard to hit and I find it's really powerful. You do have to be careful to throw the melee to one side and the grenade slightly to the other side, because otherwise the grenade actually gets stuck on the melee ability. Like midair, it's an object and it'll just hit it and the grenade ends up exploding in midair. But it's not that hard to do, you just move your mouse a little bit. It also pushes enemies back, which can be really useful, and also enemies can't shoot the Pocket Singularity out of the air as it's coming to them. The only way to get the handheld supernova ability is through charging the magnetic grenade, so you need the chaos accelerant aspect for that. Sometimes you can one-hit people and sometimes you can't. It's kind of a toss-up. You can always throw them into another surface and get them architect killed, but this just isn't really reliable. It's nice that it can push them back though, and it still does a lot of damage, so I do think it's viable, but just not terribly effective. There are fragments out there that'll get you melee energy back for doing grenade damage, which I find is useful. You can get grenade energy back from getting melee kills, even if they're not charged, which is nice. And for any grenade hits, you can get melee energy back. So there's some really nice options for looping abilities there, and it appears that every tick of damage that something does, that's how you're going to get that energy back. If you want more granular details about this, you can check out my friend Castle's video, because he's already tested all this and given specific numbers for it. Hopefully that can help you weigh the pros and cons of each fragment. Also for the weaken effect fragment, which most of us are just calling Oppressive Darkness, that and Child of the Old Gods both apply a 5% debuff to your enemies, and that usually translates to the fact that you can get a 2 crit 1 body with a 140 RPM hand cannon, so it's kind of nice actually. Now, I do have a really nice Verity's Brow build, but I just didn't find it to be that good in PvP. If you get a kill with an element matching your subclass, so in my case Void, then you get the buff Death Throws, and then you have a small moment where if you also have Oppressive Darkness active, you can one-shot somebody with a magnetic grenade, or most any grenade too. But honestly, it just wasn't enough time to rely on it, so we're not going to mention Verity's Brow in this video for PvP. Sorry. In addition to Verity's Brow, another thing that's not really discussed in this video is the different super options, and that's because each one of them is very viable. For instance, Nova Warp is excellent, and while I certainly don't have the practice to make it effective, you can do some really cool things with it. It's the only roaming super available for the Void class, and if you use the Blink Jump specifically with Astrocyte first, then you can send yourself flying across the map with Nova Warp, and it's just a very mobile and deadly super. It's not immediately easy for you to use, but it is quite good. As for the Vortex Nova Bomb, I think that one is really nice because it's just so fast and it's instant damage, and it also now kind of pulls enemies into it who are nearby, which is great. But I think my favorite out of all these was the Cataclysm Nova Bomb. It's definitely not really a Slova bomb anymore. The faster movement and the seekers it spawns really do make it excellent. Choose whichever super ability you want. You have the option to pick now, which is cool. I think they're all going to do just fine. The first build today is with Nezarec Sin. If you get a Void damage kill, then you get the buff Abyssal Extractors and you'll get Void ability energy back and Void super energy back. You can pair it with just about any grenade you want. Axions are of course very powerful, Magnetics I find are my favorite, but they're all quite good. I paired it with Child of the Old Gods and Feed the Void, which is Devour. I think the main benefit to Nezarec Sin is just staying alive and getting Void damage kills to get your fast super. But Nezarec Sin is one of the most flexible loadouts here. You can choose any super you want. I personally think the Cataclysm Nova Bomb, formerly known as Slova Bomb, is the best. And finally, here are the fragments that I'm choosing to use. You're going to get a lot of Void ability kills, so causing those to be explosions is good, and you get more intellect. Then the grenade and melee exchange ones are really good. You're just going to get energy back for each. And then finally, the good radar one that also gives intellect, so you can just crouch and see where your enemies are. Here are the mods I'm choosing to use. It's just a very standard hand cannon setup, and that's because your biggest advantage to Nezarec Sin is probably going to be something as incredibly powerful as Palindrome. Also, shout out to the Fighting Lion users out there. If you've actually put in the time to get good at Fighting Lion, you know it's powerful and that it's worth it. So Fighting Lion is an excellent pair with Nezarec Sin. Put in damage and then get the Lion cleanup around the corner and you're set. The reason I think I liked Nezarec Sin the most out of all the builds I tested was that it relied so heavily on weapon skill. Like, you just need a really powerful Void primary like Palindrome, which is one of the best Void primaries in the entire game, and then you're set. You're just going to get a ton of abilities and it's really, really good. I also did prefer Child of the Old Gods compared to Chaos Accelerant, but again, the flexibility of Nezarec and Palindrome here means that you can run just about whatever you want. The only thing I would say is mandatory is using Devour. As Voidlocks, we lost our ability to consume the grenade for Devour, which I think is a huge loss for the identity of the class. I think the animation of eating the grenade was just so iconic and fun and cool, so I'm sad to see it go. Not to mention the functionality was really awesome because you could just choose when to activate Devour at a cost because you would lose your grenade. Anyway, I digress. Devour is different these days, but it's still very, very good because now you can activate it with any Void ability kill. And that's going to happen more frequently than you think because you're going to be having so many Void abilities coming up due to the Nezarec Sin buff Abyssal Extractors. You're also going to get more supers, which is really good. Like in this match, I think I had 80 intellect, which is pretty high, but paired with Nezarec Sin, I got about 3 Nova Bombs, which is really quite a few these days where super frequency has been reduced. Really, if there's one thing that I wanted to say about this Nezarec Sin build, is just that the fact you can pair it with Palindrome. Palindrome is an incredibly powerful hand cannon, especially this season where you can slot double hand cannon targeting, so the aim assist is just off the charts, even more so than it already was. I found I was able to just go on these long streaks with Palindrome, and I was able to depend on Palindrome in competitive PvP where you really need a strong primary. I think Palindrome can have the highest range out of any 140 RPM hand cannon out there, which instantly makes it a contender for the greatest hand cannon of all time, but it also has just a wonderful base stats package. Of course, you don't have to use Palindrome, I just think it's one of the best choices out there, but you could also pair it with like Void auto rifles like Gnawing Hunger. That's still pretty good these days. You could pair it with Void SMGs like the new Funnel Web. You could pair it with a Void pulse rifle like Premonition from the Moon, which is really good. Or you could do a Void shotgun, or you could do a Void sniper like Frozen Orbit. Whatever you're most comfortable with that you're going to be finishing your kills with. So if you find you get most of your kills with shotguns rather than your primary, then maybe opt for a Void shotgun and a kinetic primary. Now, one more thing to mention about Nezarec and its flexibility is that you could certainly pair this with Chaos Accelerant. I think I really enjoyed embracing the sort of midfielder concept with this Voidlock, where you put on Child of the Old Gods and Devour, and the melee ability kind of like pushes people back, the charged magnetic grenade pushes people back, the Child of the Old Gods pushes people back, and you just kind of put everyone within your primary range. Like, that's the goal, is taking primary gunfights with people that you'll win. While the new Void Titan has a very defensive playstyle and the Void Hunter can be very aggressive, I think Void Warlock falls right in the middle, where you're trying to take mid-range engagements and win primary duels. So however you can embrace that, I think that's where you'll see the most benefit. For me, that was Child of the Old Gods, Devour, and Palindrome, and a Healing Rift. But play around with Nezarec and see what fits your playstyle and your available weapons best, because what it's going to depend on is the power of your Void weapons and how well you can use them. Alright, this build is much more about defensiveness because it uses the stag and a long-range hard-hitting weapon such as DMT or another scout rifle or a pulse rifle. Here are the aspects and fragments I paired it with. First off, I think Empowering Rift is the play because you already have such high survivability because of the stag, so you just want to do more damage. Burst Glide I think is the best here. You only have one melee choice, and then the grenade I chose is Vortex with Chaos Accelerant, which is really good for zoning people off. I don't think you need the survivability of Devour here, and that's why I'm going with Chaos Accelerant. And of course you could pair this with Axions instead, they're very good, but Vortexes are really nice too. Whatever you do, I think for this build, the one that you really shouldn't change is Child of the Old Gods, because it's so perfect for the stag. You're going to have so many rifts that you can constantly be zoning people off and weakening them with your little void buddy, and you're going to be getting health back, which pairs really nicely with your empowering rift. So you're getting health back every time you drain somebody, and you're doing much more damage with your emp rift. I chose to get grenade energy on melee final blows and melee final blows starting health regeneration, which is actually really good because I find that I'm very frequently in a stag rift taking damage from somebody, like they're meleeing me and they have to hit me 3 times and I only have to hit them 2 times. So I'll often win those weird slap battles in the rift. And then finally, I just chose to make my vortexes last longer, which is quite powerful because people just don't expect them to hang around and they do a lot of damage when they're charged. And then of course I paired it with DMT and a slug, which is one of the most powerful and defensive builds out there. Just a pretty standard mod setup for this with high energy fire. And whether or not you think this build is like scummy or whatever for using a very powerful weapon, I don't really care. It's just really good and it deserves a recommendation because it's so powerful. The key here is just pairing it with utility kickstart and having a good stat spread like 100 recovery, so you're getting those rifts back to back. When I took this build into PvP, it did exactly what I expected it to do. It was just incredibly powerful. Empowering Rift with DMT means it's a 2-tap, and I always just run Vorpal on my DMT so I can 2-tap or 3-tap basically every single super. I'm getting Charge with Light all the time because I have taking charge, so even if I leave my Rift, I often still have my damage boost. So you basically just walk around the entire match just 2-tapping people or setting up rifts at strategic locations, and people can't push you. They can't do enough damage to you, or your Void Buddy goes out and takes the damage they did to you and gives it back to you as health, and you constantly have a damage buff, so it's really easy to out TTK people. This is the power that Dead Man's Tale has had for over a year now. Much like Top Tree Dawnblade, it's one of those things that has just been in the game and been the best in the game for years, and no matter what you do with it or what you pair with it, it's just going to make you win a ton. In the future, I'd really love to see some of these things that have been good for years get a nerf, so we see some new things rise up, because even if they're good, I think they've gotten a little bit dull, and they're almost like too good. Like I get kills I don't think that I deserve, and it's just not particularly fun all the time. I just really like to feel like I earned a kill personally. Regardless, this is one of the most powerful builds out there. I think it's as powerful as if you were to pair it with Stasis, because while Stasis probably makes you have more survivability or more reversal potential, this build gives you a lot more zoning potential because of your nades, Child of the Old Gods, and your rifts giving you health and more grenade and melee energy back. It's definitely not news to anyone that the Stag and DMT are extremely powerful, but this is just a new iteration of how powerful that build is. It really did feel as good as Stasis to me because it's just a different flavor and it lets you zone people off much more. If you're looking to win some of those defensive and sedentary battles that the Crucible has become these days, then this Stag voidlock build is one of the best out there for winning. Alright, now for my favorite build of the day, the Blink Lock build. Of course paired with Astrocyte Verse to make Blink absolutely amazing. I think this build is my favorite because it's the most fun and the most powerful. I use suppressors because it paired nicely with a fragment I was using to get 100 discipline, and then after you suppress somebody you get enhanced mobility and it reloads your weapon. But pairing it with a magnetic grenade is actually probably better, especially because I'm using Chaos Accelerant, so I can get those handheld supernovas if I want. Or those melee magnetic wombo combos more, which are really good. I think it's absolutely essential to pair it with Devour to make it feel like its old self, and then I chose the fragment that makes Devour last 5 seconds longer. And then because I'm being so aggressive, I chose to get grenade energy back on melee final blows, which is very likely to happen when you're blinking up to somebody and shoddy meleeing them. As you can see, I chose another very simple shotgun hand cannon charge with light build, but you should choose whatever weapons you have fun with. This works really well with snipers, SMGs, fighting lion, just getting people's faces. I think the most important part is choosing 100 discipline and 70 strength, because that's going to make your grenade and melee come up at about the same time, so then you can do a lot more wombo combos because they're kind of timed together quite nicely. Now the reason I like this build the best is because it's Blink. It's ridiculously fun and actually really good. Movement abilities in any first-person shooter are always going to be some of the most powerful things in the entire game. This is why you see things like Transverse of Steps, Stompies, and Dune Marchers, and Top Tree Dawnblade being some of the most popular choices out there, because they're just movement abilities, and you just press a button and you move faster, and that's always going to be the best. Now with Blink, you have to press 2 buttons, and you have to think about those 2 buttons you press back to back a little bit more, so it is a little bit more challenging. but just that teleport that you can get with astrocyte and the bait that you can do on people and the quick repositioning is extremely powerful. I think astrocyte is kind of mandatory for blink because it just makes you blink further and you can pull your weapons out more quickly after blinking, and your radar is going to stay up for you a little bit more, so that really makes it much better. It's kind of like the transversal steps of blink, like it's just going to be all around better and faster. The other cool thing about blinking with astrocyte is that I did some speed tests when I spent 3 months mastering blink, which is actually my most popular video if you want to check that one out. You might like it, and it's sort of come to define the channel. But when I spent that time playing with and testing blink, we found that 2 blinks back to back is actually faster than a top tree Dawnblade doing 1 Icarus dash with the ground skate afterwards. Now if they pop their nade and they can do 2 Icarus dashes back to back, then they would be faster, but that isn't always on demand like it used to be. So now blink is kind of tied, if not a bit faster than top dawn for getting to locations first. So it really is quite nice for snipers too. Now I know what you're thinking, really, is blink actually that good? And yes, I think it is. I just think you almost never see good blinkers out there. It is extremely hard to be good with blink, and it takes years of practice. I am definitely still not one of those masters, but this is one of those abilities and mechanics in the game that I know that if you put in the time to get good with it, it can be extremely potent and rewarding. It's just a lot of people would rather not put in the time. They'd rather have the thing that's more powerful with less practice, or they just have fun with other things, which is perfectly fine as well. But if you want something fresh and unexpected that will really give you a challenge and a reward over time, I think there's nothing better to practice than blink. I found this blink build that I put together, like almost all blink builds, to have the classic aggressive and evasive qualities that we know and love about blink, and thanks to Void 3.0, a blink build has only gotten more viable because it's just gotten better. You get more abilities and more ways to fight. This build definitely made me nostalgic for those months over the summer where I practiced blink for quite some time throughout PvP and PvE, and I really hope others will give this a try because it really is just that fun, unique, and potent. It'll cause you to think about the game in different ways and to become a better player because you'll have to be more flexible. The one piece of advice that I think is most important for anyone trying out blink is just to keep it on throughout all activities. It's going to be uncomfortable at first because it's so strange, but once you start to master the strange movement nuances of blink, it just becomes so fun because you're just moving so fast and moving in such a unique way. If I were you, I would also try it with and without astrocyte. And if you can get by without astrocyte and still have a fun time and feel fast enough, go for it. But I think you'll find astrocyte really takes it to the next level where it needs to be in some of the more competitive PvP scenarios. And speaking of that, let's go talk about how Void 3.0 for Warlock fits into competitive PvP. Competitive PvP can get intense, where it feels like if you aren't using the very best things or playing the way that other people are playing, you can sometimes just lose. Like if you aren't using what the meta views as the most powerful things, it might feel like just a losing battle. In competitive PvP, the objective is winning. It's different than 6v6 modes, where the objective is much more about kind of just like goofing around and having fun, seeing if weird things work, and maybe getting some cool clips. In survival and trials or scrims, it's fun to try your hardest and win. So that means you need your build, like your weapons and your abilities, to be top tier. In this case, that's why I think speed boots like Stompies, Dune Marchers, and Transversus Steps are the top choices, or Top Tree Dawn, because movement is just that powerful in first-person shooters, especially when they're competitive and you need to have map rotations going quickly so you can spawn trap people and fight 2v3s instead of 3v3s. However, I think one of the most powerful things in competitive PvP is just team shooting and playing with your team. So really the most powerful builds are just going to be people with good primaries who know how to use them and fight with their team. Anything you can accentuate on top of that with abilities is kind of a bonus, but it's not often what's going to win you matches. Even so, I don't think many people agree with this. I think they kind of still want to see what is the most broken or powerful thing and to abuse it so they can get wins more easily in PvP. That's why things like Stag, Stasis, Dead Man's Tail, like all that comes together and people use it because it really is an incredibly potent and kind of broken build in a way. Broken meaning that it's just extremely powerful and has almost zero counters to it. So long story short, competitive PvP like survival and trials kind of has this context around it of like, it's going to be very hard. We need the best possible thing to win, and sometimes people feel like using anything but the meta is not an option, or they feel like they need to build into broken things that are kind of cheesy because they just honestly don't believe that they are that good or that they can contend. It's an unfortunate mindset that I think many people run into, where it's almost like fear or laziness, like they don't want to try to learn new things or learn to play as a team, and they would rather just learn to have individually kind of busted builds. So I think many people were definitely looking for that with Void 3.0 on Warlock. They're looking for what is that busted thing that's going to give me free kills. And that's fair, I get that. It can also just be fun to look for those things and see how you can break the game. In this case, I would say that's probably Controverse Hold with Axiom Bolts and 100 Discipline or close to it. With this build, your Axions just get very, very good, do a bunch of damage, track people forever, and more Axions spawn because of Chaos Accelerant too. It is really powerful, but again, you're kind of building into a gimmicky thing. So if that's what you want to do, go for it. It's powerful and it's fun. It's just where you're going to get more bang for your buck is learning how to work with your team and having a good primary build, or a good all-around build, like knowing all the different aspects of your Void setup that come together to make it good, rather than just one piece of the puzzle. So I think this is the context that Void Warlock finds itself in. People were looking for that sort of broken thing. The answer appears to be Axions, and for some people that's just not good enough, which is why they're not going to run it. I don't really think that there are other broken choices on this class. The Controverse Axions have gotten even better this season, and it can be really frustrating and difficult to play against them because they're really quite good. But if you're looking to sort of just win because of a broken build, I don't really think that you're going to find that on Void Warlock 3.0. I think instead what you're going to find is an invitation to make a cohesive build and work with your team, something that isn't broken and really just enhances your good gunplay or your good teamwork. And this is really cool to see because I think this is something that Destiny PvP has been asking for a really long time, and something that I would love to see happen in more subclasses, where if you want to in Control, there are gimmicky, funny, cheesy things to experiment with that feel very broken, but in something like Survival, the subclasses are just not really broken. There may be like one or two kind of powerful things like Controverse to do, but besides that, I'd love to see more subclasses become like Void 3.0, where really the reward that you're getting for using this subclass is just something that's a baseline, reliable thing, kind of like bottom tree hammers. Like just solid, good, you can rely on it like a good old car or lawnmower or something like that, where you know exactly how it works and you can just depend on it, and it's really just enhanced by your existing gun skill and teamwork. And that's what I think Voidlock 3.0 brings to the table. It's potent, unique, offers a new way to play, but it's not just like breaking the game and giving people kills that feel unfair. And I absolutely love this. I think this is the stark opposite to what we saw happen when Beyond Light dropped stasis on us, and it was just like busted and did not feel fun to play against for almost a year. For lack of a better term, it felt a little bit pay to win. Like you get Beyond Light, you get stasis, you put on Shatter Dive or Behemoth or Shadebinder, and that's how you win. I'm not saying that was intentional or that's precisely how it was. I just do think that was kind of the impact it had on a lot of competitive PvP people. It just felt too free. And I'm happy to say that Void 3.0, on the Warlock at least, does not feel that way, and I think that's a good thing. That's going to make some people turn away from it just because they want those free things, and it's going to make other people see this unique class for what it really is, which is a midfielder, and it's so cool and fun. Those who embrace the midfielder and balanced aspect of the new Void Warlock, I think can go quite far with it. It's just as good as many of the other subclass choices out there, and it could potentially be really fun for you or really good for you, especially if you're looking to try something new, or if you're trying to fill out a certain role in your team, like that sort of mid-range anchor that's pushing people back and zoning people off and really defining your territory in a match. If you're looking for that role, I think there's no better subclass than this one. And if you just want the same old meta stuff that's been powerful for 2 years, I think you already know what subclass and weapons you should use. Like I've said before, there's nothing wrong with enjoying something that's popular or enjoying something that's good. I just think it's important to know that Voidlock 3.0 is another viable choice that feels balanced, fun, and like it could have a clearly defined role in a team setup. I think it's cool and unique, and it'll be really interesting to see how people use this over the next few months. I think one of the most interesting and one-of-a-kind things about this subclass is that it rewards you for already knowing how to position yourself and your team well and how to use your guns well. So if you're good at those things and like choosing advantageous positions to fight, then this is just going to take you to that next level. And if you want a different role like the defensiveness of the Void Titan or the aggressiveness of the Void Hunter, then you can go with those instead. Now, speaking of Hunter and Titan, if you're looking for information about how to use those classes to their fullest, I think you should check out Pattycakes' video on the Void Hunter 3.0, and hopefully you can learn some things from there about how to make the most out of that new class. It really is quite good. And if you're a Titan interested in the new Sentinel 3.0, I cannot recommend highly enough my friend Maki Plays. In the description and the pinned comment is a link to his guide about how to master Sentinel and really make it much better than you thought it could be. It's really cool to see new Destiny creators on the scene. It makes me excited about the future. I think Maki, or Prof as I call him, because he's kind of like the crazy professor of Destiny, has such a unique voice and take on the game, and his mindset is one of the best I've ever seen out there. If something goes wrong in PvP for him, rather than complaining and putting all the blame on opponents, he's the kind of player who thinks about what he could have done differently and how he could have done better. It is a remarkably refreshing attitude to see in the Destiny 2 PvP community, which can easily become the polar opposite of this. If there are more Destiny people coming to the scene like Maki in the future, I think the PvP community has a really bright future. So please check my friend out and go subscribe right now. And if you want more Blink voidlock gameplay, you can go check out my video on my 3 months covering Blink. Alright, thanks so much for watching and thank you for your time. I really hope you do try out this Voidlock 3.0. It's a really unique midfielder kind of class that's pretty fun and viable. If you like this one, consider supporting the channel in some way, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.